You've been in exile for years. For an ordinary South African that hasn't met you, that has never had any conversations with you, how would you describe yourself?
I am a very ordinary woman, privileged by the fact that I have been exposed to most remarkable people in my middle to late 20s when I joined the ANC. But my political awareness starts with me at university when I was a member of the South African Students' Organization, SASO. I feel privileged by the fact that I got exposed much early in my youthful days, though already post 25, to the world at large. I wouldn't have had the privilege of even visiting a neighboring country had I not been part of the ANC. I got married in 1972 to Brigitte Mabandla, who I had met in the South African students' movement. We married in November of 1972. We were both enthusiastic activists then. We are of the group of Steve Biko, Bani Pichane, Mampila Rampila, and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, because those are my contemporaries in the student movement. After our marriage, we obviously left for exile because we got detained, and it was uncomfortable remaining in South Africa, but also because we had been invited by persons of ANC membership into the ANC. My husband had been what you'd call a young pioneer, what you'd call a group just lower than the youth at Lovedale, a member of the ANC youth, as it were. He used to speak fondly of encounters with Chris Hani, who even addressed them in those days. As I was saying, when I finally got to be part of the ANC, my life changed. I was exposed to a different kind of education, to politics, your political economy, the contesting ideologies of the world. I completed my law degree at the University of Zambia, having had been excluded from TEFLOP.
Excluded in terms of studying law, TEFLOP? Or?
Just instead, it was a time when there were exclusions of activists, or activists or troublesome students. I wouldn't know whether I was a troublesome student that was hopeless, and maybe that's why I was excluded, but I was also politically active. The important thing is that I did complete my degree, and at the time, we had to do what you'd call a mini thesis maybe for the LLB, and I did international trade and investment. It's you know how it works with developing countries, and
how did you get into exam?
oh,
What was the push that led you to get into exam?
Oh, it was tough. Lindelo and myself were banned when we were released from prison, from detention. And we were under extreme surveillance, and we were not working. And as I was saying, ANC at the time was very agile, had very agile persons who would approach SASO, former SASO, or any young people at university, post-university, to join the ANC. So we were in the rush of the 1975 group, not 76, 75. We landed in Botswana. We were actually helped by Baba. There was a person very loved by ourselves who was in SASO and who was a very good courier who helped to get people out of the country. I do recall now of someone who got killed in detention, but who was said to have moved a wave of persons, and we were probably working with Baba. I will remember the name. I don't know. Sorry about that.
But you
he was in SASO with us. But it was long after we were released and were in different provinces.
Surely it was a time of the brutal apartheid system.
It was.
And you, to land into detention,
Yes.
both you and Mandela,
Yes.
you must have done something. You don't just land into detention. Or was that the system at the time?
I think it was the system at the time. Look, we were very active. We were part of the Frelimo rally, even in organizing and mobilizing. And it is true that some of us were asked to recommend people who could go out, even though I wasn't in any particular cell, so to speak. But we were a group that was taken post-Frelimo, the Frelimo rally, as young student activists.
Taken where?
Taken into prison. Yeah, I was collected. I was already in Durban. I had already been excluded from university. I was now, I had just had a baby, Nonkululeko, the lady you met.
Yeah.
That is my firstborn. I had just given birth to her. My sister, O'Hara, came by night, I'm told, to come and retrieve the child whom we had left in a room. We're staying in an informal settlement. We're staying in we stayed in Lamontville first when my husband was principal. But we then went to stay, I think I forget this place, it's Claremont. You know, one time I was telling young women when I was Minister of Housing, I was saying, I know your pain. I know a woman's pain staying in a place like that, like this. Because when I was pregnant with my first daughter, I had to go to the toilet outside. So it's nice to have those experiences.
Tell us a number of people, your contemporaries and older, has been referred to Frelimo Rally, not to a young person today, 2016 South Africa. What was that Frelimo Rally all about? Because Frelimo is surely not a South African political party. It's a Mozambican liberation movement. What was that rally all about in South Africa?
You know, for a young person, I would say they're lucky today. They can express their solidarity, their thoughts. We couldn't organize, we couldn't, mobilize for the common good. We couldn't without being disturbed, without being threatened with arrest or harassment. So Frelimo was an expression of solidarity by South African students. Think of your free movement in South Africa. We were young, and Frelimo Mozambique had just been liberated. And we had dreams of having our own country liberated, and we were expressing our solidarity. At that time, by the way, many of us were mindful of activities of our liberation movements, the African National Congress, the Pan-Africanist Congress. So Frelimo Rally was a rally in solidarity with the liberation of the people of Mozambique.
Which year was that?
Wow. It should have been 74. It should have been 74 because 75, that's when we got detained, and that's when many of us left South Africa.
In 74, you were 26 years old, in the prime of your youth as a young adult.
Yes.
And you made a decision to be part of a liberation movement that wants to overthrow a powerful apartheid state.
Of course.
What was the driver there for you personally?
Oh, goodness. You know, nothing then is as annoying as a disturbance of your sense of worth and dignity. You know, apartheid was an insult in your face every day. Whether you're sleeping, you're walking, you're eating, it was always in your face. And I can't imagine young people who would say, I wouldn't fight for my freedom in those days. It was very bad. Abject poverty. You know, as SASO students, we did a lot of community work, and we internalized the suffering of our people because we were there. During holidays, we would go to communities and we saw it all, and we were touched. And I think that youth comes with power also, and that's the passion. That passion is power. And
to have power in your hands, or
you have it in your heart. It's the fire. It's the passion. And I must say that I wasn't an exception. I think it's common. And I think those who observe history, those seized with activity of humankind over the years would tell that we hit back when oppressed. You know, it's just in the nature of us human beings, I think.
I can imagine that with you, Brigitte Mabandla and Daniel Mabandla, your partner, your lifetime partner, husband, that this is a house that is rich with political history and understanding and the scars of the apartheid system. And I just saw your grandchild, Loiso. What do you tell him about what is the history of South Africa? Or are you being romantic about it? No. Like many people are about the brutal system and how people survive through that system.
I don't. I'm also privileged to be an aunt to many young people at tertiary now. And those that I've interacted with, I've tried to share my experience. And I then have learned also about their quest for freedom. Very similar, they had for greater freedom. They are impatient not to have the economic opportunities that they deserve. And that's the primary issue at hand. So I listened to them very carefully, and I exchanged ideas about our experience and about the importance of being strategic and thinking things through, you know. So it's always, as long as we live, we are always students of life, I think.
You took the direction of wanting to study law and the whole question of jurisprudence, and you started focusing on gender and women. Why was that important at a particular time in our history for you to want to explore that arena?
In after the Kabwe conference in Lusaka, let me say, one of the resolutions of Kabwe was to establish the Constitutional Committee of the ANC. And I was the only woman appointed onto the Constitutional Committee. Not because I had any knowledge of law, so to speak, but because I was available.
But you had degrees in law?
I had a degree in law, but I really had not practiced as a lawyer. But I'd been exposed extensively, you know, standing in for greater persons at multilateral meetings where the ANC had an observer status, you know, like the Human Rights Commission. I learned a lot. But if you were willing to learn, ANC was just that platform. You know, there were lots of opportunity. But here's the point I want to make. Towards the end of the 80s, to be precise, 1989, it was clear that there could be the beginnings of negotiations. OR, I will tell you that in my view, OR is the author of our constitution in many ways. I went appointed, and in between, as we're preparing for the possible negotiations and we're beginning to talk matters constitutional, OR had really spoken to me to say, remember, he was a mentor and I was such a small person. And here was OR saying to me, you have to take on, you have to lead in the constitutionalization of women's and children's rights. On the matter of children's rights, OR had been to the Harare Children's Conference earlier and had been moved by the testimony of the arrests and abuse of children and of the disappearance of many children. And so he was very clear that whatever happens, we must find the constitution, we must find a constitution that will protect even children's rights. On my part, I felt honored and took that as instructions very seriously. So working with the Women's League and with Mrs. Mbegi Frinichi, we organized a conference in Lusaka on constitutionalizing women's rights. That was the beginning for us. That time it was the women's section. In that year, 1989, if I'm not mistaken, we also went to Amsterdam to the Malibongwe conference, where once more the matters of protecting women's rights just became very important. With regards to children, when we landed, I was amongst the first group. We were just the background persons who had come in to help ANC get established, the ones who can run and do stuff, and be deployed randomly to work. So 1990, I was one of those people. Zola Square came with us, and Zola Square, Dr. Zola Square, was the head and convener of the Constitutional Committee of the ANC. When we came into the country, we then asked for the UNICEF to come into the country because of we argued that the situation of children was so bad. In KZN, we had child-headed households and we were very worried. We immediately got into activism, organized ourselves as and mingled, with people from all over, as academics or as special interest groups, but for children. And we formed the NACC. I don't know. That's an acronym.
National Children Crisis Committee.
No, the National Children's Committee. I'll find the full name. And Zola Square was on it. We all were on it. Motsecha was on it. Just to show it was a broad platform. And I can tell you now, that's where we couched the phrase that finally was to be found in the Constitution today. It was crafted at the time by that collective. We had the ear of the National Executive Committee. I was just an ordinary member of the ANC.
Was that the precursor to the National Committee for the Rights of Children?
That's the one.
That's the committee?
Yes.
That you guys pulled together?
Yes, that's the one.
But that was pulled together at Somerset Hospital, Somerset Hotel in Cape Town at a conference there. Do you know have a conference?
Yes, we had the conference, but I'm saying it was the precursor to what eventually that, yes.
Now, Let's go
what is it?
National Committee
For the Rights of the Child, yes.
Yes.
And
NCOC.
yes, and at UWC, in that little thing that I set up, we gave support to the work of the NCRC as well.
But that wasn't a little thing, it was called the Community Law Center. It was quite...
The Community Law Center was the big one, but the small thing was the Gender and Children's platform, which was that it was firstly a platform like that.
Yes. Now, can we just take a step back? You're highlighting the
And then you're a part of that.
Yes, but this is about you. Yes,
No, but there. Really, it's, yes.
Yes, I was part of that.
Yes, and then the Somerset West Conference for Children for the first time, that was also to elevate the rights of the child, yes.
Yes, that was quite a constellation
of course.
Mass movement,
yes.
mass activity around
absolutely.
children
yes.
as the center,
yes.
as the future.
Yes.
But if we take a step back, there's the Cupware conference.
Yes.
You would not raise that if it wasn't an important conference. Just give people a sense, what was the Cupware conference?
I wasn't at the Cupware conference. I was in the front country. I was in Botswana then. And I think there are people who are better situated. But it was a turning point for the ANC. It was like a reaffirming of its values and the direction it should take. As I say, that's where they took a resolution, amongst other decisions, to have the Constitutional Committee.
You earlier mentioned that your contemporaries was Mapela Rapela,
yes,
Steve Biko,
yes,
and other names that you have mentioned.
yes.
What influence did they have on your political outlook as a young person at the time? Because you were all young at the time.
No, I think we were age mates, more or less.
What does it mean?
We would be apart by 1 or 2 years,
Right.
but we were peers.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it was not individuals that were influential. It was the currency, the currency, the passion of students saying no to apartheid, and black students saying, we the people will do it for ourselves. That that was the spirit. So I think one drew strength from one another. From Steve Biko was a peer, and no hierarchy. I would come to recognize hierarchy in politics when I joined the ANC in 1975.
Have you met Steve Biko and Rampela and other?
I know them very well.
Tell us about your engagements with them. Because honey, you've mentioned these names.
Oh.
What was your clearly different ideological orientations to the liberation struggle, but clearly important figures that were at the same time as you. So what was your relationship with Steve and what's your relationship with Chris and Rampela?
Steve was a warm, passionate person, very convincing and articulate, but then was my husband. So I had the constructive dialogues right in my own backyard, in my home, in that way. I will remember Mampila for her commitment to healthcare. I do remember Mampila working long hours at places if we were to have a retreat, and she would work in communities around childcare, you know, without, you know, as a volunteer. For me, that was remarkable. Beyond that, I have nothing that I remember her especially for. The person, and it would be different when I talk about Chris Hahn.
Please tell us.
That's a commander, a clear-headed political leader, very compassionate, but very firm, outstanding, and a doer, you know. That's and for me then would be a leader in the hierarchical sense, you know. He may well have been a person within the age group of Bolindelwe, but he was a leader of distinction and tried and tested by the time we showed up. Remember, the Wanki battle happened before we arrived.
You speak quite passionately about the role Oor Tambo played and how Oor Tambo asked you to be part of this committee on to deal with children issues constitutionally. Did he phone you? Did he come around to your office and say, Brigitte Mabandla, I want you to do this? Did it flow through a message? How did Oor get that message to you? Himself, or was everything coded?
You know, leadership decoded? In exile was very reachable. You know, no mystery around their names. And very much strong mentors. Always wanted to teach wherever they are, wherever, you know. When I was formally informed, I think I was informed through the communication channels of the NEC, and we were called and we had a meeting properly with OR. It was maybe some months thereafter that OR then said, and that's when it was clear that now we are going for the Harare Declaration. And the men were meticulous, very careful, you know. By the time the draft came out and was ready, Maduna, you know, Penwell Maduna, Dr. Maduna, were very much a part of the crafting of that Harare Declaration. So OR was not a leader in absentia. You know, he was there. His presence was felt if he was there in Lusaka. Even the children of the ANC at the ANC crèche would see him because he would visit. So there was nothing mysterious about his leadership.
But surely the message came through coding and decoding.
No, but no. Really. It was as we were talking, he called me, he engaged me, and he said, you know, we have to do something about gender and also about children. No, there was no mystery about it. And you know, I was the only woman, remember? Maybe he was just affirming me. Maybe he was just making me feel important too, you know? But I took it very seriously.
You served under the leadership of Oor Tambo, and then afterwards under the leadership of Mandela.
Yes.
And then under the leadership of Thabo Mbeki.
Yes.
All three presidents of the African National Congress.
Yes.
If you think back, what are the distinctive features of each of those leaders?
Yes.
Because there seems to be a view that that's all the same, and I'm saying it can't be all the same. Because people are inherently unique.
Yes. And I'm also appointed by the present president as the chair of the National Orders.
Right.
And I'm also on the panel of eminent persons on governance, the APRM.
Right.
Yeah, so in reality, I've worked maybe with all of them, including Khalema, all five.
All five. So tell us the leadership differences, because it's quite critical to see how people see who leads them in terms of their qualities.
Yes.
Distinctive qualities.
Distinctive qualities. I want to declare immediately that I didn't quite work closely with OR to say I had to account to him.
Right.
Immediately, the NEC of the time established the Constitutional Committee. My immediate leader was Zola Square.
Yes, but you were under the veil.
Yes, I'm coming to that.
Okay, all right.
At the time that I was in the ANC, when it was led by OR, was a very difficult time, exceptionally difficult. But I came to admire his resoluteness, his calmness, his firmness, and his leadership qualities, leading from the front. That was the time when there were huge incursions from MK into the country. And that was the time when there were assaults, which cost us dearly in some instances with the quality of lives that we lost. Lesotho, Matola, Botswana, Gaborone. And there were the times when there were attacks. Our people, our places were bombed. Similarly, the places for ZANU also were attacked in Lusaka. Those were difficult times. Yet we had this man who was a leader, who was always firm, who always, at the right time, made statements that were commands, in a sense, to the nation at large in South Africa, to the international community directly, and to its membership, both underground inside the country and also there. So our radio freedom was a weapon, a very effective communication weapon. And everybody listened to the directives that came from that about what is to be done. And those directives they came always at the right time. He was a brave man. He led from the front. When the ANC had discontent in its midst, and there was a suspicion that the ANC was infiltrated, and there was Bomkatashia and that. The president of the ANC gave directives. They had NEC meetings that took decisions which had resolutions for problems that we're facing at each given time. I was in the legal committee of the ANC. And immediately we were dispatched to Luanda to go and address the question of the Mkatashia, of the people who were, because it's a camp, it was a military camp. So in a camp where there is uprisings, action is swift and on that. But then there is a need to then begin to address and find out what were the causes of those problems. So OR was always seized with challenges that needed attention, and he acted swiftly. And for me, I think that's one of the most important qualities of leadership. And if you ask me, I have had time to live under that kind of authority and can recall the strength of the man. But there were times also when, because of repression in South Africa, hundreds of little ones would rush out. And OR would intervene timelessly and say, no, they're not going to MK. They are going to school. And would come and convince people. Today, some of the qualified persons you interact with are products of that. And they would be encouraged. You know, the other day, on the day when we were commemorating OR, Mojo was reflecting, General Mojo, former MK, former general of the South African Army in retirement, was reflecting about the fact that OR used to bring him sweets. That was the soft side of the man. Ever so warm, so natural, yes. And also, let's look at OR on the international platform. Oh, you know, the Swedes who I ended up interacting with a lot, especially post-conflict, before that, when we were building the ANC here, because they were funding. They had such respect for him. Olaf Palmer just so adored the man because he was a leader. He was precise. He didn't obey. In Zulu, we say, obenga ngabazi. He wasn't hesitant. He was forthright where required to give responses. So whether it was in war, intellectually, in environments of settlement where people were living, there were times when there would be shortage or delays of supplies to the camps, even to us settled persons. And believe it or not, it was something that would trouble a leader of OR's caliber. He would really take it upon himself to make sure that we're working with others, but it's his leadership that these matters should be attended. So OR was a great man. I will tell you my little story. When Joe Gabi died, OR wanted me. Oh, there was a advocate Sibanda in Zimbabwe who was willing to take me to come and do my articles because, you know, something worried OR that how can you just have a degree? And then he worked so hard. But I won't say he really wanted me to stay and work in Harare. He even intervened on my behalf. And I was an ordinary member of the African National Congress. So he was a caring person. Just ordinary. So he would touch you, just ordinary. I was not a child of anybody important, but just a person, you know. The ANC was a home to us. And all effort was made to make people as comfortable as they could be, but also to open their horizons in many ways that were available to the ANC. Now coming to
please.
Now coming to Madiba. Again, I can't claim to have worked with Madiba closely. But I was a deputy in his administration.
The deputy minister?
Yes. But I must also say that he was engaging as a person. He agreed to come and deliver a speech at a small place when he had just been released from prison at UWC. We had a conference on gender, and we called him. I think I have something of that, and he spoke about women because we're telling him about the struggle for women, about the importance of constitutionalizing women's rights, you know, having an gendered constitution. Forthright, a good listener, but I said forthright. So you had to work to convince him on something you are proposing. He was a good leader. I think that my reading of his leadership of the country, you know, when he was indicted following a dispute with, he wasn't in dispute, but it was a matter brought by Louis Late. We went, yes,
rugby.
Yes, rugby, yes.
Rugby
We went to prison. He was magnanimous. And he felt that he was not above the law. And I thought he set a beautiful example to the country in that way. But he also had this commitment to bringing people, you know, the diverse people of South Africa together, trying to find common cause for them, you know. I didn't deal with him directly as much as I did with, for example, the subsequent president, Mbeki, in whose cabinet I served, both as Minister of Housing and the Minister of Justice. Yes. You know, when I was appointed to the housing portfolio, I learned more about our country. I came to know the depth of our people's poverty. Very saddened by the problem at hand, and where it mattered with the people I was close to, I did communicate my concern about the growing disparities amongst people. It was just there to see, you know. I knew we were in trouble. I took greater interest in I didn't even think that housing, I thought housing, like the grants, ameliorate and they are necessary. They are necessary to enable people to move on and even to find better opportunities for themselves. I was convinced then, as I am today, that we missed a step with regard to education. You know, when I grew up in the townships, it was fashion for parents to say, "You, my daughter is a nurse or is a teacher or is studying, or my boy is," not even big tertiary, but just that. So education has always been revered by our people as, you know, as important for opening those doors, you know. But I felt we had missed a step around education.
What is that step?
I don't know. First, I started reflecting on the closure of technicons and again recalling, because of exposure, so many artisan centers in developed countries, Germany in particular. And I was saying, Tina, we are closing them, we've almost closed them. And I just had lots of questions around education. And it made me quite anxious. But at the right platforms of the ANC, I participated and shared my views. So I did find ways of expressing it. But now you're asking for reflection. So I don't want to appear like I'm distancing myself from that. I was very much a part of that.
There's a claim that on reflection, that our Tambo was the leader that managed to bring all conflicting parties together and find resolve, and then take the lead going forward, like you explained. Mandela was the public leader that brought our Tambo Muslims of the ANC. Mandela was focused on bringing South Africans together as a president. Thabo Mbeki, and the reason why I'm stopping at Thabo Mbeki, because we talk about those that stopped in office.
Okay.
Thabo Mbeki was the bolder, technocratic president, holding the technical capabilities of the state. How do you respond to a claim like that?
I am going to say to you, there is no doubt that without the steady hand of the ANC would have broken into pieces outside. It was the most challenging period of the ANC. You know, I spent 30 years of those years, 30-something years with the ANC in exile. And I think I'm correct in saying that he was a binder. He did bring together. That is why I'm saying he had the right statement at the right time, you know, issuing always instructions about the way forward. So that's the builder within the ANC. I mean, even when he used to direct messages to South Africa, fellow South Africans. And those messages, even today when you can see him still pulling the ANC together, you know. In the ANC, there was no religious factions. There were no tribal factions. When I say factions, I mean people really at each other's throats. There was nothing like that. So it is true that OR brought coherence and gave strong leadership to the ANC. Madiba is known and acknowledged for pulling the diverse people of South Africa together. You know, somebody once said, hey, we thought he would come and do something for us. La equnu, la isuka khona. No, he didn't do that. He built, he tried. Look at his speeches. At all times, to weave the South Africa together. He wanted that kind of thing. I think that when you compare now the three and you take Mbeki in, that was a technocrat par excellence, if I may say so. Because for them to reach that growth, they had to tinker. To the anger of persons who felt that this is a neoliberal approach, that will have consequences for us going forward. But the truth of the matter is that it stabilized the economy for them. That's my belief. This is my view. And also there was that a commitment in bringing out the best from the middle class, especially the black middle class. I think they benefited a lot during the time of Mbeki. Mbeki also, what I have great memories about is on working, that's the pride of the man, working towards acknowledging the heritage of black South Africa. I really enjoyed working with him when we conceptualized the coat of arms, Freedom Park. When we did, I must tell you then, I was nearly, if they had tomatoes, they would have hit me with the tomatoes at the, at the Stellenbosch conference. It started in Parliament. I say we must celebrate the Anglo-Boer War. We must pull the carpet from under these people's feet. The information and literature shows that this was a war, that this was the scramble for Africa. This was a war to dispossess us. So we can't let, at that time they were saying centenary. They were so busy collecting, trying to get regiments from Australia, from Europe. I said, but those people can't come and do that like I. It can't be correct. So when I went to Parliament, Mbeki said I must tell people, he was deputy minister at that time. This is during the time of Madiba. But he was in the lead. And you know what? They howled me in the ANC caucus. And he called me to his office. And I was still dazed. What was that about? When I got, he says, let's leave it. I said, no, I'm going to table it in Stellenbosch. He says, no, don't table it. Let's see how we work it out. I said, no, but we have to do it. And you know what? Then I am very proud of that contribution I made because it turned the pendulum, the history in our favor. It stopped people drumming up a lie about the Anglo-Boer War and making it a piece interpreted in their own mindset of what was history. My goodness, There were people in Africa when that war took place.
So
what was that about them? Now, let me tell you.
The truth about
I was Deputy Minister of Arts and Culture, Science and Technology. And at that time, there were things coming through that they wanted to celebrate this Anglo-Boer War. But had they done so, we would have lived with the lie that it was an Anglo-Boer War, when it was an African war, a war to dispossess Africans further, you know. Then I worked with Thompson, the Archive Center at Wits, to do research for me, to help us. We worked furiously. I got the support. I wanted academics of a person I'd known, Luli Kalinikos, and we went digging, and I could put my head up and say, no, we are celebrating. And you know, Filion was so angry with me. That was why Filion left Parliament. There was a debate, you look for that footage, with me and him. He was saying, how dare you celebrate with this? Now on my side, black people sent me scolding notes and said, bring back people who died in exile. You're busy doing fine, you know. But for me, it was a political statement. You know, it was a political statement, and I thought we should make it. And after the Anglo-Boer War, there are so many books now written telling the true story. Today we know which chiefs were there, where we know about the tragedy of our people being torn between fighting groups. We now know the truth. We now know that black women and children died in that war and were buried en masse in some instances. We are left with writers who can unpack this and tell the story.
Two last questions. You, by taking it, holding on to the story, the truth of the Anglo War, and having the Deputy President at the time, Thabo Mbeki, asking you to let it slip, you persisted. But you were also finding yourself as the individual relative to the collective.
No, let me put it
in Parliament.
No, let me put it differently. I, as a deployee, with the material before me, which was saying the centenary is to be celebrated, and I read, then I thought, no, but it can't be where are the Africans in the narrative? There was nothing. Then I said, no, this can't be the case. I shared this with the presidency, and that time the deputy president was in, and even with them with Madin, and they said, well, let's see, let's take it to the ANC. So I started at caucus before going to the ANC conference. Yeah. But at the caucus, as I was about to the people, at face value, it was like you're saying, let's celebrate the centenary. And I was saying, no, let's kill the centenary and find out the truth about the Anglo-Boer War. Right. Kill the centenary and get the story.
Kill the concept of the centenary because of the particular elements.
It was a lie.
Yes.
It was a lie, you know. And for me, that was a big achievement in the arts and culture environment. And then the last one, which I am proud of, but I know many of my colleagues don't understand it. It was the return of the remains of Sarah Baartman. You know, by being exposed by the ANC to a number of platforms in those days, and coming to understand the deep hurt of many indigenous persons, of the strippings of their heritage, the humiliation, of the distortion of their culture in interpretation. I just felt when I went to the University of Men in Paris, where the remains were, that, and I read more about Sarah Baartman. I just thought the Khoisan are our people, and if we don't respect their heritage, and then we don't respect ourselves. And that it would be important to return the remains of Sarah Baartman. But I then set up a reference group. I spoke to all persons who belonged to communities that have a claim to that heritage to talk to me. And eventually we brought the remains of Sarah Baartman. I'm very proud also that even our emblem, we went out of our way to unearth an idiom that we can put in our emblem. Our coat of arms is our emblem, which says who we are. If you can learn to acknowledge those who are regarded the smallest and make them the most important, then you are yourself affirmed. So for me, that was the theory in my head and went along with that. Mbeki, former President Mbeki, was very good at listening to innovative ideas of that kind. But everybody knows also that he doesn't, he's not ordinarily friendly. Wouldn't be patting people on their shoulders all the time, and maybe is withdrawn in that way, and maybe that would be seen as a weakness for a person who's a leader.
Tell us when you went to Paris, sorry, when you came out of exile, after more than 30 years in exile, and then fast track forward to the future, you then went to Paris to look at the Sarah Baartman remains and read about the story from the French perspective about it. If I always wonder, were you not angry?
I think, let me put it this way.
Were you not allowed to show any anger?
No, I think the passion and determination to return the remains was felt, and it was understood. And when we took that decision, we were invited to Parliament, and the French, the ordinary French people also accepted. But I must say, intellectuals, academics frowned on that. They said, you know, when remains are used for science research, you cannot regard that as a human being, because that's research material. There may be truth in that, but also for me there was a powerful symbolism as we're building a nation to say this is what happened to our people without their full knowledge, and that's how this lady got lost to us. So we brought all her remains, even the parts that were used for research, we also brought them to bury them here.
Because she was a symbol of female oppression and imperialism.
Absolutely, and ridiculous. And
Imperialism.
yes, imperialism and sexual abuse. Absolutely, she was that. That's what I should have said to you, actually. Sorry.
And you guys were still not angry?
Very, very angry. Very angry because being one who respects women and expects societies to treat women equally as men, knowing of this past was very, very painful, you know. And I think there is footage where I spoke about that. I don't remember now. But remember, it was in my capacity as deputy minister.
Right.
Yes.
When you get a chance to look back over your years from a student activist to a person that was forced to go into exile by conditions at the time. You came back, you established a path for gender and children's rights, in particular the culmination of the NCO, the National Committee on the Rights of Children. You served in the executive of the country, in Mbeki executive, in Nelson Mandela's executive, and then afterwards Thabo Mbeki's executive. You still serve the country in different portfolios. If you look back, what are the three things that you will tell anybody, whether it's a student, whether it's a political person that wants to serve in a political party, a business person also occupy leadership positions. What are the three things that you will tell them based on your experience?
The hardest lessons I've had were when I served as Minister of Justice. I will draw two of the lessons from that. Part of the lessons are for government going forward. What is to be done? I honestly think a state needs a special mechanism for seeking accountability from persons at leadership level, at the executive level. At parliamentary level and at the level of the judiciary. If we have those mechanisms, we need to establish them. We may want to have a norm that should run across, that no one who is serving at those levels should continue without appearing before a special board. Now I'm talking before you even talk courts. That then if somebody says, so an ethical, a platform that determines some kind of ethics. I don't know if what they have in the US would be adequate. I wouldn't say so. I think you'd need, because you also don't need something that will be bastardized, that will be used for political gains. You want a platform that will be able to receive reports of accountability. And I don't know what is that. I'm just thinking. You see, if there was, then even as you start investigating a matter, it's being investigated, then you have this first step, which doesn't diminish the person, because people may be innocent, but also which is a tool to protect the institutions. So I would say to policymakers, find that tool. You see, when we said to judges, they need to account and to declare their assets, they were so reluctant. And I feel sorry for them, because I can see many of them then are into businesses. And there's a conflict there, because those very same matters will appear before them. So there is that anxiety that I have going forward about governance. The public protector was not intended it was intended directly for the public. That was the first notion. But institutions develop into new things. And I actually think that that one, the Constitutional Court has pronounced, has defined its new powers, but in reality, when I was there, when we were discussing institutions and building them, the mandate was not expansive. But as they grow, you know, as society, as our democracy changes and develops, I don't know. The other thing that I would say, who else am I advising?
Any person that wants to be in a leadership position.
To a black...
Any young person across the race group that says, I want to be a leader. What does your experience say does that person have to have?
Honesty. Or everybody say honest integrity, and it's not easy. But you must be, once you want to be a leader, you must be ready to be opened up, to be scrutinized. But you must also have something to give to society. When you are a leader, you are in service of others. You are a leader because you are accountable to them. So you have to. If things fail, then you are, you know. I fear the interpretation that suggests that when you are a leader, you hold overall power over people. That's not leadership. That's not the leadership I'm describing. But I think you always need to reflect when you are a leader. You need to have the humility to listen. I can tell you, it's very lonely up there. So you need, where you have an opportunity to learn about yourself, about your weaknesses, not only your strengths, listen. That is what I would tell my student leader. But I do have a message to the young black person, that nothing beats hard work. Learn, 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 learn. You know, and that they have to seize opportunities that are there, you know, and they have to always plow back. That's what I would say.
Great. Thank you very much.